Well, good morning, everybody. Like Mr. MC said, my name is Lin Lu, and I'm from the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization. Before I begin, I thought I would take this opportunity to congratulate MPA on your 30th anniversary and for SMW on your 20th edition of this conference. So congratulations on that. And before we get started, I think we need to acknowledge the crisis in the Middle East. And it's with that in mind, I think we want to talk about maritime decarbonization. As of this morning, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Roughly 20% of global oil consumption and a large fraction of liquefied natural gas goes through that corridor. So what that means is this has rippling effect on all over the world. And this region especially is hard hit because we depend so much, our oil and gas comes from that region. And of course, shipping has had to respond accordingly. Vessels have been rerouted amidst soaring freight prices and rising insurance premiums. And of course, with ship operators that have vessels stuck in the Gulf, the immediate priority remains crew safety. So priorities shift. What this really brings to focus is this idea of the energy trilemma: affordability, accessibility, and sustainability. And specific to the crisis, I think we look at this through the lens of energy resilience, national security, and environmental protection. So in a moment like this, of course, resilience and security don't just come to fore, they are dominant. And now we layer upon this an additional level of complexity. On decarbonization, the direction of travel is clear. We have a mandate. The IMO GHG strategy remains intact. That's net zero by or around 2050. But the question really is the pathway to getting there. That's no longer certain, especially with a net zero framework and the pricing mechanism that remains unresolved. So it's very interesting to see the conversations that are happening this week and next week in London, and so that's something that we're going to keep close tabs on. At the same time, parts of the industry are already operating under carbon constraints. We've got the EU ETS that impacts maritime businesses. We've got the Fuel EU Maritime that's beginning to impose progressively tighter limits on greenhouse gas intensity of fuels. So at a moment like this, the system is really pulled in multiple directions. We've got short-term shocks like the Hormuz. We've got global policy uncertainty, and of course, regional regulations that are starting to shape the decisions we make today. And by the way, the decisions we make today, whether it's on fuels or ships or infrastructure, they're going to impact us for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So to me, the question is really beyond whether maritime decarbonization is falling behind. I think it's way more nuanced than that. And I'm very, very fortunate to have this esteemed panel, and I'm hoping to use this opportunity to talk about the decisions that need to be made when the near term, the long term, and the regulatory landscapes are no longer aligned, so there are tensions on all these three. So what does progress look like, right? So joining me on this panel, we have the whole value chain represented. We've got ship owners, operators, and by definition, fuel purchasers. We've got AP Moller Maersk, represented by Leonardo Sanzo. We've got CMB Tech with Alex Saveris, and MSC Shipping with Marie-Caroline Laurent. And then, of course, we've got the energy trader that's aspiring fuel bunkering supplier in Sumitomo, so with Yamaguchi-san, and then an engine designer, developer, and maker in Wärtsilä with Stefan Nusso here. So I'd like to start with a rapid round of rapid fire, and we can come back and do the deep dive later, on really what's on your mind today, right? I mean, the industry is dealing with a lot right now, so what is front and foremost on your mind? What lies beyond the public narrative? Maybe we can start with you.
Of course, the first thoughts go to what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the security of our colleagues on board the vessels and the colleagues that are working also in the region. So that's, of course, top of mind at the moment. then looking at decarbonization, I think one could fall in the trap of not doing anything and being very concerned and just waiting and see. And instead, as a company, we spend a lot of time in what we can control, our sphere of control. And there's a lot of work to be done there. So we introduced a new network last year, which is a lot more efficient than the previous design we had. Every day we have thousands of colleagues on board the vessel and tens of them ashore working on making our fleet more efficient day in, day out. And at the same time, we are testing new technology, new fuels to be ready to scale up whenever time will call for it. So there's a lot in our sphere of control that we can use and our time and attention on, and that's exactly where we are diverting our focus on.
Alex, what's on your mind?
Well, very short term, exactly the same as all of us, is the safety of our people. But then when you think beyond that, it is what is going to be the longer term impact of everything which has happened over the last 4 or 5 years on shipping in general, trade lanes, decarbonization. It's the topic of this panel. And I think we are seeing the beginning of some tectonic shifts in terms of a recalibration of trade relationships worldwide. I think that's very interesting. And as a shipping man, of course, we need to have an opinion on that. And it's not very easy right now, but that's definitely on my mind.
Mary and Caroline?
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, in terms of the current situation, we remain very much committed to our long-term objective. You reminded that we still have the IMO strategy. We had committed to a net zero 2050 target even before that IMO strategy had been adopted. So the direction of travel remains the same. We're still very committed to that long-term goal. And for us today, especially in the current situation, even more than before, confirming our approach of keeping a flexible and agile approach with initial investment that can be future-proofed, but can also be adapted depending on the situation. So maintaining that line of travel in the long term and building into our choices some flexibility to adapt to the short term.
Right, so staying on course, but figuring out optionality along the way. Yamaguchi-san?
Okay, thank you very much. We are from Sumitomo. We are a bit unique compared with the other participants. We are neither ship owners nor any engine manufacturer. We are a trading house. We are handling molecules. In the country of Singapore, we have been providing a conventional oil and gas marine fuel, more than 60, 70 years old. And now we are on the journey to transit from conventional oil to new energy, or decarbonization energy. Through those journeys, we are trying to contribute to the both energy security and decarbonization. That's where we are from.
Thank you. Stefan?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn, for the question, and good morning, everyone. Of course, short term, and what's on my mind is what's on everyone's mind these days, and maybe for us, being in a development and technology manufacturer's role, we are worried about the longer term implications of the crisis we are in now. And also this situation coincides with us with a very expansive moment. We are investing heavily in expanding capacity, so this is the near-term concern. Then longer term, what's been on my mind and keeps being on my mind is how we are prioritizing over time our investments when it comes to the various decarbonization technologies. We have been investing heavily on the sustainable fuel side for 4 or 5 years now, and how to balance that with the near-term energy pragmatism, I would call it today. So this, of course, causes a little bit of reshuffling of priorities for us. So that's the longer-term thing on my mind.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I think what's consistent throughout I'm hearing is we've got to balance short-term needs with long-term ambition. We need to build in flexibility. We need to build in optionality because the long term is there, and that's ultimately where we're headed. Maybe now we can take an opportunity to deep dive. We've got 3 different fuel pathways that our panelists have chosen here. So maybe I'll come to Leonardo first to talk about Maersk and methanol. I know Maersk has made one of the earliest large-scale bets on methanol, ordering methanol-capable ships and having offtakes. And I remember vividly when the Maersk Laura had bunkered here for the first time with much fanfare. So what convinced Maersk to commit billions at this point to methanol? And this was before the ecosystem was ready. Do you question that decision? What made you make that decision when, you know, this was even before now, right? Multiple years ago where the ecosystem was not ready.
Sure, allow me to take a step back, right? So as A.P. Møller - Maersk, we have a net zero target by 2040 and an ambitious intermediate target by 2030.
Does that target still hold today?
It does. Of course, there are risks, uncertainty, but we are still committing. We're doing our level best to deliver against those commitments. And the path that we have developed is basically hinging on 2 drivers. Number 1, efficiency of the network and the vessels. Number 2 is low carbon energy sources, methanol being one of them. When we took the decision of building a methanol dual fuel vessel back in 2021, we knew it could be done. So I'm arguing against calling it necessarily a bet. It was, we had a conviction that it could be done, technology was there. And now looking at it, these vessels are fitting the network very well. They're performing exceptionally well on efficiency and reliability and other parameters. In considering that vessels are long-term investment, we are convinced that indeed enabling multiple fuel choices, methanol being one, conventional fuel as a fallback, or potentially in the future also ethanol, is really the right investment decision.
So, being the front runner, surely there were technical challenges and there were hiccups along the way and pain points along the way. Can you share a little bit about what those are? I mean, I think your colleagues have publicly spoken about the practical challenges of non-standardized bunkering and more intensive engine maintenance or even operational adjustments. And let's not forget sort of the fuel supply side of things. Can you talk to the learnings?
For sure. So when we took the decision, we knew that we were going to enter some uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And as part of the plan, we knew that some teething issue would eventually occur. That said, we worked with a lot of constant care and diligence in being as ready as possible for that. And the number of technical operational issues have been dealt with. Already from the get-go, we were able to bunker and operate on methanol. On one of the first vessels we did, or the first one we did the maiden voyage on methanol, or a big part of it. When we took delivery of the large ones, on number 5, if I remember correctly, we did a Trans-Pacific maiden voyage all on green methanol. So we were able to take those learnings fairly early on and being able to deliver on the commitments we had. In terms of takeaways, number 1, the importance of collaboration, effective collaboration across the value chain with regulators, such as Class and Flag. And being a first mover actually gives you an opportunity to shape standards on how vessels are designed and operated. And that's a big opportunity we seized. We also worked clearly with port authorities and Singapore MPA being a great example of that in establishing standards that were needed. As you mentioned, we did the first ship-to-ship bunkering here in 2023. And then we continue the work on establishing the standards further, right? So working with this like-minded and fast-moving partners was essential, and it remains essential to the energy transition. The other takeaway is the importance of orchestrating the energy transition across our own organization. So it was not just building the vessels, selecting the technology, it's also about moving upstream on the sourcing of fuel. And there's been immense learning there on how to do that in a good way, efficiently, taking care of the volumes, but actually also understanding production, cost, scale up. These are early learnings that we took that no one had at the time. And are giving us a lot of insights and value and positioning us well for the future. Also, very importantly, in terms of collaboration, is rallying the whole organization. And what probably gave me the biggest surprise was the enthusiasm of our seafarers. Whenever we have a new building program, there's a lot of enthusiasm. When it came to the methanol dual fuel vessel, thousands of seafarers applied for sailing on these vessels, and I get good skin when I think of it. And they were instrumental in making this very efficient and safe.
And were there additional training that the seafarers have to go through? And
Yes.
how, I mean, being, again, the front runner, there's no curriculum ahead. How do you manage that?
So we developed together with the regulators, so with Flag and Class, the standards and also the training requirements. And we had all our seafarers undergoing this training, also key staff ashore. It's a program about 120 hours per, depending then, of course, on rank and position. Some is more thorough, for others is a bit lighter. But we were able to tailor this program and deploy it very efficiently and getting basically the needed knowledge fast into the organization.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's expansion of the chain, going up chain, up the supply chain, but also this idea of building the ecosystem as you go, because the ecosystem doesn't exist quite yet. Alex, I'd like to bring you in because you're now embarking on this journey with your first vessels coming on water very, very soon, and we're all watching very closely that space. How are you looking at this?
Well, we're looking at this the same way as Maersk was looking at methanol 5 years ago. So we're very excited. But there's a lot of stumbling blocks that we had to solve on the way. And we're a little bit later, Leonardo, than you. But we are looking at the lessons learned from the LNG pathway and then the methanol pathway. Now it's the ammonia pathway. We have the luxury, I'm not a liner operator, of being able to choose one pathway and not all of them. I think big companies like Maersk and MSC, of course, are doing a multi-fuel approach. We believe eventually ammonia will be the cheapest. Ammonia will be the only carbon-free fuel. And that's why we've invested so much time and money to make it happen. But, Lynn, we still need to prove it. We still need to go through what Leonardo has done with Maersk over the last couple of years to prove it's safe, to prove it works, and to prove ultimately that it's the cheapest solution for shipping.
Right, and I mean, methanol and ammonia are fundamentally different. One's a liquid, the other one's a gas, and one's significantly more toxic than the other. How are you thinking about the specificities of it being ammonia as opposed to methanol?
Well, look, I think the first question we asked ourselves was not which molecule do we need to choose. The first question we asked ourselves is which customer will pay for it? And the answer was very simple: nobody. So when nobody wants to pay for a green product, you need to think about when I make a choice, ultimately it will have to be as expensive or as cheap as diesel. And in that choice, and then you come down to specificity and all the different things, well, from batteries all the way to nuclear power, we thought ammonia was going to be the best pathway.
And never underestimate human ingenuity, right? We'll figure out how to deal with it. We understand that we need to do it safely, and so we need to kind of figure out the necessary procedures, the protocols need to be in place so that this can happen safely.
But the big advantage on everything we're discussing here is that it's been done before. It's been done 50 years ago, 100 years ago, sometimes even 150 years ago. When there was no diesel in the Second World War in Europe, we were using ammonia in buses. And actually the Germans were using it in their tanks. We've been using ammonia in our economy for years and years and years as a refrigerant, as a fertilizer. So what shipping is doing, and I think it goes for methanol and also for LNG before, we are using the experience of using these molecules in other sectors and transposing it to shipping, with some, of course, specific changes that we need to make, because, of course, bringing it on board of a ship is different than on board of a truck.
Right. Understanding the risk profile and then contextualizing it for the specific application. Leonardo, do you have any advice for Alex, if you will, since you're ahead of the curve?
First of all, I would like to congratulate Alexander and your company in choosing the ammonia pathway. And I think all of us actually will have to learn from you eventually. I know you have one container vessel and 10 Newcastle Max that will soon hit the water. And so it's imminent, you know, the real learnings coming in. And probably, you know, the reflection that I have is on the importance of staying close to the organization. So as you're soon taking delivery, this is the moment that seafarers, the technical organization, will engage even more. For us, it proved to be such an immense value to stay close to the learning, making sure that those were captured in the organization and shared and utilized for improving fast and with scale. So that's probably the only advice that I have. And as I said, lots to learn from you soon.
Well, thanks a lot. If I just may give a compliment back to Maersk, and this was not, we didn't discuss this before, that we were going to give each other compliments. But what Maersk has done is it has shown to all of us, shipping people, that sometimes you just need to do things instead of talking about it. And you might be wrong. Ultimately, we don't know. Methanol and ammonia, will it be around in 20 years from now? We don't know. But doing it, make sure that we learn by doing, that we can showcase to others, and we can also learn from our mistakes. So thanks for the compliment. We're not there yet, Leonardo, but I will invite you on board of our ship to show you what we have done and also to learn from what you guys have done.
What a pleasure.
I would like to go on board the vessel too.
Well, you will be welcome as well.
Plenty of brotherly love on stage here. And completely agree, this idea of learning by doing. And the energy transition is going to be messy. We're going to have to learn and figure out how to get there. I'd like to bring in Yamaguchi-san here. You've heard from Alex. Is that enough for you to think about supply, bringing in supply? How do you think about ammonia supply?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me have a deep dive about ammonia possibility. Let's have a moment where we are standing about ammonia marine fuel. Firstly, about availability. As you know, there are several clean ammonia production projects on FID. Therefore, basically, I believe there is no worry about availability. Demand, thanks to the ship owners, we have more than 50 vessels on orders for ammonia fuel. Therefore, demand is there. Technology, thanks to the engine manufacturer, already the ammonia fuel engine is not on concept, but on commercial. Last but not least, the most important item would be safety. About the safety, thanks to the efforts of the Singapore government, safety-related regulatory guidance has been already on finalizations. And many frameworks and the safety regulation is now on being established. As Sumitomo, as a trading house, we are very much keen to keep on front running together with many authorities or many partners on keep safe operations. Therefore, safety is also not a big issue. Like that, ammonia marine fuel is not on a concept. It's already on commercial. But one biggest issue is still there is not enough scalability or commercial viabilities. In order to enhance commercial viability or scalability, what we need to do is we need to increase the liquidity of the ammonia marine fuel. Therefore, we would like to encourage everybody to use more ammonia or to produce more ammonia, etc. That is the only things what we can accelerate the liquidity of the ammonia marine fuel. That I think.
So how do you break this chicken and egg question, right? I mean, so you're looking at Alex and you're saying,
chicken.
use it more. Alex is saying, I need the supply. So how do you break the cycle?
I'm making 11 chicken already this year, so.
So what does it take to break that cycle? Yamaguchi-san? What does it take to break this cycle? Is 11 chicken enough?
I think it's already on order. Therefore, we can enhance to use more and consume more.
Okay. And let me bring in Stefan on the other side of the value chain. If we don't have engines, we don't have ammonia dual fuel vessels. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the engine side of things. Earlier we heard about there could be operational challenges that emerge with early adoption of engines. From a technical perspective, what are the limits to that flexibility that ship owners should be aware of?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think in reality there are very few, if any, limitations on engines only level or engines per se. I think the challenges are more on the whole system side, and particularly today when there is a lot of vessels being built with various kinds of readiness notations, and some are more ready than others. I think that the challenges there will be to, in midst of operation, to actually make that flexibility a reality might be a challenge. With some of the readiness levels would require, just to give one example, to take a vessel out of operation for a significant period of time, and I personally I'm doubting that will be economically sustainable. So I think it's yes, there are challenges, but they are, I would say, they are not limited or focused on the engine side. It's more the whole system and the setup on board where the challenge is.
So a systems integration problem, but given the need to build in optionality and flexibility, it sounds like theoretically there could be, an infinite number of permutations and combinations. So how does an engine designer, engine maker think about these infinite numbers of permutations and combinations?
I would say for an engine maker, the answer to that is quite simple, and the word is modularity. So we are building our product so they are modular, and that you minimize the number of specific components you exchange and keep the base engine the same. So, but then. Going beyond that, yes, the options are infinite, but I think there is one major divider when it comes to, particularly if we talk now new vessels, and it's the moment when you decide whether you go for a liquid fuel or a gas mode fuel. And now I'm talking modes here, not because. That determines a bit the pathways forward and which options you can actually realize on the way. Maybe I would like to underline here that when we talk about decarbonization pathways, people often tend to think that there is a pathway, is a straight line from point A to point B. This is not the reality I envision we will have. It will be a journey with many different waypoints on the way, and then what I said about choosing the liquid route versus the gas route is more, which direction do you travel? Mm-hmm. So that this I think is the main divider.
And I guess that goes along the lines, earlier on we were talking, Leonardo, right before we came on stage, about methanol and ethanol drop-ins. And so this goes to this idea of liquid versus a gas fuel. And then within liquid, I think you can, to the extent that blend-in can happen, that can happen. Otherwise, small modifications need to be made. Marie-Caroline, you've heard this conversation about trailblazing, about new fuels, and about the challenges and opportunities associated with them. So do they reinforce caution or the need to move early despite the risk? How is MSC Shipping thinking about this?
Thank you, Lynn. So we're very practical people in MSC. For us, the decarbonization, as I said, we're very committed to our target. But for us, it's how we start now on delivering initial progress on our decarbonization. So we've hit this year the mark of 1,000 ships in our fleet. We continue investing heavily on new vessels. And the question for us, also looking at the profile of our group, we have container, of course, but we also have cruise lines and ferries. And so looking across our group really was the conversation and the decision on how do we get started already now on our decarbonization journey? What are the options available today and not in 20 years, but today, that will allow us to make those first steps and set a path. After long consideration, and I have to say that all of the options we've been discussing so far were a part of our consideration and are still part of our consideration, we've made a very clear choice as a group to pursue the LNG pathway. When we say LNG pathway, as usual, I always want to precise that we're not claiming to do our decarbonization with fossil LNG. That's not what it is about, but it is about the technology that we invest in terms of our vessels and our engines, and make sure that we build the infrastructure that goes with it. And the beauty of LNG and the pathway is that once you've built that infrastructure, once you've invested in those vessels, you can then progress with a bio-LNG or e-fuel pathway as a drop-in solution. So for us, this has been a very practical way, again, in our humble way of planning things, to get started. So we have today 150 LNG vessels, dual fuel on order for the container. All of our new cruise vessels are LNG also, and we have 5 ferries that we will be taking delivery of since last year, but in the coming years on LNG. So really the path was for us, and the choice was a very practical one. We don't close the door to any future solution, but we've been taking an approach that was not necessarily looking at our silver bullet in 2040 or 2050, but really looking at what we could do now. I may also say that we're not alone. When you look at the order book, especially last year, I think we've seen a clear acceleration in the investment in LNG that somehow confirms also our choice. On the container side, I think we're now at 2/3 of the order book in terms of dual fuel vessel, which are LNG vessels. Similar proportion on the cruise side with 2/3 of the order book. So we see really LNG as being one of the choice of the industry. We see the infrastructure is developing. We have more than 250 ports now where we can bunker. And we see really that experience that we're building also on the use of biomethane. You mentioned that last year we started with the implementation of FuelEU Maritime. That has allowed for us to gain also some experience on this. And as part of our compliance, we've actually invested already in biomethane for compliance, all sourced in Europe, manure-based, demonstrating already excellent performance in terms of GHG saving. And we will be planning to further invest on biomethane in the coming years. So for us again, and really I appreciate all the experience that's been built up in the industry, the LNG choice has been a very practical one. And we see today that we can deliver on emission cutting with this pathway. And we will see indeed then for the future what else we could add, or depending on the future, what brings, what we should also continue investing in.
Thank you for that. What about for the skeptics in the room who say, oh, hang on one second, LNG is okay, but then there's slip, and LNG is significantly warming. In fact, it's 380 times more warming than CO2. How do you respond to that? And then I'll bring Stefan in too.
Yes, no, so this is obviously something that has been a key challenge in the LNG technology adoption. Again, this is not just a shipping problem, as mentioned. LNG is part of the energy choice of society for heating and for many purposes. On the shipping side, we've invested significantly into new technology, new engine, thanks to Wärtsilä, where we partner a lot on reducing the methane slip. So we see significant progress in that reduction. I think there's also a significant effort done by states in terms of the whole supply of LNG and avoiding methane slip in the distribution. We see in Europe significant regulation being in place also to address the upstream part of that concern. And so we see that there are solutions to address this, and we're quite hopeful. At least we've seen and demonstrated it as part of all vessels deployment and new engines investment, that we can reduce that methane slip significantly. I also hear the criticism that, and this is why I always like to start my intervention by saying we're not decarbonizing by fossil LNG. We're really talking here about the technology and the infrastructure, and really the end goal is to go for biomethane and e-methane as a long-term solution. And we're already starting to see investment and significant volumes as well, because I have to also point out that what we've seen in our experience of last year, the supply of biomethane, for instance, last year was sufficient to cover our needs. So we also are quite hopeful.
Stefan, on the slip issue.
Yeah, and if you allow me to first make a comment on this future-proofing you are referring to, and of course technology in itself has a very central role in that, but I think also we need to remember that future-proofing is also about partnering with people who can maintain that future-proof status over time. And why I say that, and to tie back to the methane slip part, so if we look at our gas engines, since the first engines came out into the market, which is already more than 20 years ago, almost 25, we have been cutting methane slip by over 95% to date, and the journey continues. And this is just another proof point as to why, working with, and what we have been doing along this period is to take these new technologies out to our customers as retrofits to reduce methane slip on existing vessels. So this is why I highlight the importance of, yes, today's technology, and the fact that that is future-proof is one thing, but future-proof hardware is nothing if you are not working with someone who have the capability to keep it future-proof over time.
Mm-hmm. I like that answer, so future-proofing. Yamaguchi-san, on the supply side, are you seeing movements specifically for LNG as bunker fuel? How are you seeing that market?
Thank you very much. About supplyability, including LNG or bio, let me put it like this. Say, 5 or 10 years ago, when Sumitomo started thinking about the decarbonization marine fuel, what we are thinking was we thought ammonia marine fuel will be able to take over the positions of conventional oil and gas relatively in a shorter period. But having this 5 or 10 years, especially due to this delay of the decarbonization in these days, we clearly recognize it is taking a longer journey than what we have been expected. Therefore, in the past 5 to 3 years, what we have put effort in this industry is basically 3. Still, we keep supplying continuously for conventional oil and gas for marine fuel. And secondary, as a kind of like a bridge energy or bridge marine fuel, we are trying to put more effort to enhance LNG marine fuel or bio marine fuel. That is the second one. And the last one is be back to about ammonia marine fuel. although the first demand or first flow is really limited, very small, we are trying to make those economically viable or effective by reducing like a CapEx, OpEx. Those three efforts we have been doing in the markets.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we move beyond fuels, I'm just looking at Pigeonhole, and I have a bunch of questions for Leonardo on ethanol. So maybe we talk a little bit about ethanol before we move on. Will ethanol replace methanol?
So ethanol has some advantages in terms of maturity of production, but there are some clear sustainability challenges to be solved, particularly when referring to first generation ethanol. And that's certainly something that needs to be factored in the equation before answering one over the other. And as I said from the beginning, in Maersk, we started with methanol, but we are looking at multiple pathways, including bio-LNG, including testing ethanol as we are doing now, knowing that there are some problems to be solved, including already using biodiesel in either as a B100 or as a blend-in with other fuels. So there's multiple paths that we're already taking. And as learning comes from them, we will know what role will they play in our energy transition roadmap. It's premature to say whether it will replace methanol or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's also another question about methanol, ethanol alike, but I mean more e-methanol, I think, where I think this touches upon a little bit what Alex had mentioned, which is, ammonia is a zero carbon fuel. Methanol is not a zero carbon fuel, and so you need a sustainable CO2 source. How do you speak to that?
So we're using both green biomethanol and green e-methanol, right, in different quantities, right? And when looking at the learnings, biomethanol has a lot more scalability opportunity. The energy demand, so the electricity demand is growing, and so the cost of it also will grow, and probably, from what we see now, e-methanol may have challenges in terms of pricing compared to biomethanol. And maybe that's actually makes me answer a question that I saw, that, what is the biggest hurdle on methanol? And I think it's a false myth, the one about availability. Often we're asked, okay, you're investing on this vessel, but there's not enough methanol. Once the demand signal is ready, we know that methanol can be scaled quite fast.
The perpetual chicken and egg, right?
Yeah, but it can be solved. For that, we need some global regulations, and that enable multiple fuels, multiple technologies. The biggest challenge is the price difference. The biggest challenge is the price difference between conventional hydrocarbon fuels and biofuels. And again, this points to regulation, hopefully global, as opposed to a patchwork of regional regulations.
Well, given the uncertainty of the global regulation and all the conversations that are happening this week and next week, where do you see things? I think, Alex, ammonia was something that was a strategy before the Middle East crisis, before, we were all hoping on the net zero framework coming through. How do you see things now?
Well, I think nobody moved on methanol or ammonia based on the regulations. I think people moved before, anticipating the regulations, sometimes hoping for the regulations, but we know that within the IMO, sometimes things take time. The one thing that we need more than regulations is technology and investment. And if you invest and you try to improve your technology and make your technology cheaper, ultimately you will have a shift purely because of cost. And sorry for repeating myself, but we will never decarbonize shipping based on taxes and regulations. We will only be able to decarbonize shipping one day if the decarbonized shipping is cheaper than the carbonized shipping.
Well, but the energy transition is inherently inflationary. There's going to be a cost associated with it. With Marie Caroline and with Leonardo, I can see that they can pass this fuel cost, the premium, onto the end customer. But for a bulk carrier, how do you think about passing on costs?
We need to find like-minded people. We need to find partners that are willing to bridge the gap in the initial phase, and by co-investing with us, accelerate the development of production and bring scale to it. And I think that's really the only thing that we can do as shipping. But there's good news, Ellen. Never ever has renewable electricity been as cheap as today. Never ever have we produced so much renewable electricity as today. The fact that the stock markets are high, that we are still enjoying a nice conference here, is thanks to the fact that Europe and the rest of the world, and definitely Asia, have invested massive amounts in renewable electricity, and we are less dependent on oil and gas than before. So
I
pretty
wouldn't say that
optimistic.
we're less dependent on oil and gas than before. I mean, there's massive renewables, but that's gone to this idea of addition, right? Additionality. Data centers require electrons, so that's where the electrons have been going. So I think our dependence on fossil fuel has remained more or less. So this is sort of the conundrum, right?
Well, I don't agree. I think yes for coal, not for oil and gas. Coal is saving the day today. Otherwise, we would really be in a big issue. But on oil and gas, our dependency has reduced. But we can agree to disagree. But just look at the facts. Just look at the facts. The world is suffering, but the world has adapted and is adapting. And I personally think, going forward for shipping, we should continue to invest in these renewable energy sources, because ultimately they will give us the cheaper cost.
No question about it. Stefan, I saw you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think Alexander is talking about the really fundamentally important thing here, because at the end of the day, the human being is such that we are drawn to what is competitive, and we are always trying to take cost out. And in order to take cost out of this equation, it requires scale. Scale requires investments. So for me, the important game changer here is that whether it's then artificially, like Alexander says, regulations and taxes and so forth might spark those investments, or whether there are pioneers, like we have some examples here. All of these signs spark investments across the whole stakeholder landscape, and that is what is required in order to scale the decarbonization. So if you ask me, you referred to the chicken and egg here, and you referred to the IMO discussions. I'm a firm believer that one of the things, it's not the only one, but one of the things that will fuel this scaling is that we get some clarity on the regulatory landscape, because that enables investments. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to comment.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I think it provides having some global policy provides an indicator, provides certainty. I know, Marie, when you speak to the policymaker, what are the biggest gaps that you see between ambition, regulatory ambition, and the operational realities of where things are, especially today, right? So what is the one thing that you wish regulators better understood?
No, and I think it's not all gloom and doom from the regulatory side. We already have some regional regulations in place. The experience we've gained is that a carbon tax doesn't deliver on decarbonization directly. Things like fuel intensity trajectory turn out to be quite an efficient mechanism, because it's directly related to investment into fuels or technologies. And so I think with regulators, it's not just about shipping again, it's climate policy at large. This is their job, to set up very ambitious targets, maybe sometimes people will say unrealistic targets, and to then set up a framework to deliver on it. What we've seen, and this is a bit our hope also for next week, is that despite maybe the diplomatic tension around the IMO and ZF, there are some very practical progress done. The work has not stopped at IMO. We are still working and hoping to deliver very quickly on the life cycle assessment, the LCA guidelines. There are some progress done on certification, which to us is a key blockade today in terms of deployment of fuel. So understanding what's the value attached to each fuel and being able to have a common global certification scheme so we know what to buy. And again, we're not fuel producer. We are humble ship owner and ship operator, and basically our message is just tell us what is it we can buy, is it certified, is it considered good, yes or no from a regulatory perspective, and we'll do it, and we'll deliver. Because I agree with Alex, we're not waiting for a prescriptive regulation to tell us what to do. What we're asking for are kind of bandwidth guidelines to tell us with this objective in mind, then how we can develop our strategy.
Yep.
And with that baseline, and I think honestly there's no much controversy around those elements, we should be able to move ahead.
And those are well within IMO's mandate, those operational guidelines, those fuel standards. So, Yamaguchi-san, did you want to come in on this? How do these fuel standards impact how you look at what you source?
Okay. Yeah, as everybody explains, we are on the journey to decarbonize our marine fuel. In the process, I think global support or global regulatory support is very much important. But at the same time, I think we really need regional regulatory support or financial support. In that sense, now we are in Singapore. Therefore, if we pick up the example of Singapore, Singapore government has been working very much efficiently. As I explained to you, regulatory guidance for ammonia marine fuel has been gradually setting up thanks to Singapore government. And as for increasing liquidity for ammonia marine fuel, thanks to the support EMA or MPA, RFP process for ammonia bunkering has been well working. That's aggregating the possible demand into one shot, and it is enhancing the liquidity of the market. I think those global support and the regional support would be working nicely. That is a necessary things, I think.
Any comments from the panelists on this? Anybody wants to follow up? So, okay, then we look at Sumitomo again. So if Sumitomo is expected to invest in ammonia production, right, and supply infrastructure, what do you need from companies that are sitting here in terms of commitments and partnerships and demand signals before you're willing to move? Be specific.
Understand. Yeah, as I explained to you, first to say, Sumitomo is a trading house. Therefore, we can do whatever we are required in the market, handling molecule or making an investment for infrastructure. But we need partners. We need colleagues to working together. Therefore, in that sense, we would like to encourage all the participants of this SMW to enhance more usage of decarbonization energy, especially in the marine sector. That is a general comment what I can say.
Thank you. Anybody want to come in on this? No? Okay, well, we have 5 minutes, so I think I'd like to do a couple of questions across the panelists. I'd like you to close your eyes and think back 5 years ago when you set your decarbonization strategy. What is that one assumption in your original strategy that's changed the most? And how has that shaped what you're doing today? Maybe we start with Stefan, and then we'll work our way back.
Yeah, I would say 5 years ago we were extremely enthusiastically allocating a lot of resource and money into R&D activities related to all of these fuels we have been talking about today. And maybe the assumption that we made at that time, or what we did not count on, was what happened in London in October, and other things that have happened also now more recently when it comes to how energy security and this what I call energy pragmatism has taken over. Maybe we anticipated a more straight line development, if I put it like that. This is not to say that we are not continuing our part to invest. We are continuing to invest heavily, but focus has gradually shifted a little bit. So methane slip, as you mentioned, has a huge attention today, much bigger than it had 5 years ago, I would say.
Yamaguchi-san?
Okay, this is a bit duplicated my message. 5 years ago, we are dreaming the energy transition would be done by like a one night or overnight. But the reality is totally different. There are many unexpected things happens. Therefore, as I explained to you, Sumitomo, we have adjusted our speed by shifting to like a bridge energy, LNG bunkering or bio bunkering. But continuously, we are putting effort to enhance ammonia marine fuel, as even if it's small, as it's economically valuable. From now on, I think the same unexpected things would be keep on happening. Therefore, we need to keep adjusting our speed along with the reality. That's what I'm thinking.
Marie-Caroline?
No, if we look at 5 years ago, we were definitely still looking at all the options on the table, making plans for new vessels, being methanol, ammonia, looking at all the different possibilities. We've even done some trials on some of our ship segments with fuel cells, batteries. And so I think we were still very much in the dark trying to figure out what was the best option. I think 5 years ago we would have expected states, governments to take a much bigger proactive role as being a partner with the maritime industry in defining those solutions together. And maybe I should say we've been somehow left a little bit on our own in the dark to figure out what to do. And this is why you see, as a representation of this panel, we might have trialed and we are still trying different solutions. We're left to analyze at the level of each of our different segments and profile of operation what works best for us. And we're also left to negotiate on our own with each port and each authority the infrastructure necessary and the deployment at each port, which I think, of course, it's part of our job, but I think we're still a bit surprised as how much we have to fight in each and every port to convince authorities that if you want the big and the modern ship and the more energy efficient ship, you might need to think about an LNG bunkering development. And having those conversations on our own, having to go from port to port, I think is a bit of a surprise compared to what we would have expected 5 years ago.
I'm sure this is something that you both relate well to, too. So Alex, 5 years ago and now?
5 years ago, I thought we would see a lot of green hydrogen and green ammonia production in Europe, and it's been much slower than expected. But on the positive side, I would never have expected to see so many projects in Asia and particularly in China to come to fruition, and that's a positive surprise. So the balance is definitely positive. 5 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be able to buy green ammonia delivering in 2026 at the cost we are paying today.
We're all rooting for you, so. Leonardo?
I think we knew already way back then that the energy transition is not linear. And we knew a lot of challenges would come our way, and avoiding those challenges was never good for us, never a choice, never an option for us. And that remains, right? One of the key learnings has been around the role that customers play. So when we started the energy transition, we had quite an overwhelming support from customers and initially quite a rapid growth in what we call eco-delivery. So volumes that are delivered, containers that are delivered with either green methanol or biofuels, etc. Now the amount of customers have grown, but the volume is stagnant. And that got us back to look at the whole value chain needed to be in place. So technology to be affordable and more cost competitive, as well as regulations in place, enabling multiple standards, multiple pathways. So probably learning that indeed we couldn't only hinge, let's say, on the commercial part, but requiring really the whole ecosystem to be in place to support the energy transition.
So if I may, the question of whether maritime decarbonization is falling behind, I think has to be nuanced, like I said at the beginning, and it's not so much falling behind, but more as an ecosystem, as a community, we've learned a lot, and decarbonization has gotten more pragmatic, if you will. We've tried a bunch of things, we've learned a bunch, and there's still a bunch of things that we still need to do, and I think we are still headed in the right direction, and that's important, but it's gotten more pragmatic in terms of what we need to consider. At GCMD, I know what we're trying to do is to address these common barriers. We do what we can with what we have now to address safety, technical, operational barriers so that when ship owners and ship operators are ready to adopt those kinds of solutions, that we can help build the ecosystem confidence for you to adopt those kinds of. So we look forward to partnering with all of you and others in the audience as well. So with that, please join me in thanking our panel today. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you so much to Professor Liu and distinguished panelists.